Hey, everybody, welcome to the Book Leads Impactful Books for Life and Leadership. I'm your series host and leadership performance coach, John Jaramillo. This podcast series is about getting to the books that have impacted the lives of the people in my network. So these are great leads to books that I may not have heard about, never thought about, never considered, but there are lessons in there that are valuable. And I want to hear what my network has taken away from those books, what's contributed the most to who they are as a leader, as a in their personal life, in their work, their business, whatever it may be. And the way that I do this is I have three categories, where the first category is a book that I haven't read, but they want to share with me, school me on. A second one where we've both read the book. And then the third one has to do with one that they've written or had a hand in publishing and getting out there. So for this particular episode, my guest will be Dr. Tanya Cornelius. Tanya is a self-described teacher and learner at heart. She's a mentor to many, a trusted advisor to senior executives, and an award-winning human resources executive with over 20 years of experience in large, high-profile media organizations. Currently, Tanya is Vice President of Development, Inclusion, and Wellness at ESPN, where she's been for 12 years. Prior to joining ESPN, Tanya led employee and executive development and organizational effectiveness at Turner Broadcasting based in Atlanta, Georgia. Dr. Cornelius, my friend Tanya, holds a bachelor's degree in telecommunications and broadcast media from the University of Florida and a master's and doctoral degrees in human resource and organizational development from the University of Georgia. She serves on several boards and contributes to organizations whose missions align with her passions for lifting people higher and making a difference in the world. Tanya is a founder of Your Aha Life, a global movement, community, and blog focused on helping people reach their highest potential and live their best life. In addition to reading, Tanya loves to spend time traveling, enjoying great meals and conversations with family and close friends, being in nature and watching HGTV and, of course, ESPN. She's a proud mother to her 3 adult children and a grandmother to 4. She resides in West Hartford, Connecticut with her, I don't want to mispronounce this. Out of everything in this bio, Tanya, that I don't want to is it Woodle?
Yes.
Her Woodle
Yes.
dog, Marley. Everything else, I didn't mind, but then I got to your dog, and I know I don't want to mispronounce that for you. But in
He's a
any
he's
case,
a he's a Wheaten Terrier Poodle mix.
yeah. And I
Yeah.
meant to ask you what the W stood for. I figured obviously Woodle Poodle, but
Yeah.
yeah, I'd never heard of I'm not a dog person. Well,
Oh,
I should say I am a dog person, but I just have never had a pet in the family. So I'm not too familiar with the various species, but I do know obviously from having friends who have dogs, like just what they mean to them. They're part of the family. So I again, that's why I didn't want to trip that up at the very
yeah.
outset.
You're missing out, John. You got to get a dog or a pet. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I know. That's what I've always heard. And my kid is always asking me, I'm like, maybe next week, maybe next week. But in any case, I'm lucky enough to have Tanya here for this conversation. I had met Tanya with when a mutual connection of ours had invited me to join Your Aha Life, this community on Facebook and across different platforms. Specifically, I joined the Facebook group, and I just love Tanya how you, and we'll get into it, but I love how you just empower everybody, motivate everybody, share thoughts, insights about what life is, how to develop yourself, what to get. And maybe this is what I'm taking away. But just how to get the most out of everything you're involved in, how to give your best, how to get to your best, how to see yourself. And it's been amazing the people that I've met, the events that you have. I attended your book club where I heard about Atomic Habits and read that book. So I'm just very appreciative of everything that you shared and what you try to get out of that community, those members of that community. It's one of those places that I go to where it's just kind of you go to for motivation, for inspiration. So I really appreciate that.
I am so happy to hear you describe it that way, John. The AHA community on Facebook is, of course, as you know, our private Facebook community, and it's almost 600 members in there. That's unbelievable because I just started as just a gathering spot and it's grown. But it is like minded people who are very focused on personal development, self actualization, but also living purposeful lives. And I love, love, love. I go to the community every day, of course, just to check in, but I love that it's our community. It's not like just, it doesn't feel like it's my community. It feels like it's our community because we're so many people are always contributing, and I learn just as much as I hopefully give, I get much just as much, and we continue to just learn and grow together. So I love that you're there because you always add something so tremendously to the group. And thank you for being there.
No, it's amazing. Just because again, it is like that regular with everything going on in the world, it's just nice to go somewhere where it's about positivity, it's about support, it's about growth. Excuse me. And even with the pandemic and everything kind of leading to online, I think it's been a blessing to come across that community. And as you said, you don't see it as your community, but you're just such an amazing facilitator of all these different avenues to just try to sort things out.
Yeah.
I think if there's ever a period in my life where I needed something like that, it's definitely in these last 2 years during the pandemic. So, so thank you for that.
Yeah. Thank you.
So before we dive into the conversation, who are you today? So I read your bio, gave some insight into your background, but how do you balance out your work, whether it's your professional career, your volunteering career, putting together? I see the community as a volunteer situation or a passion, but how would you describe the various components that make up who you are today?
Wow. I mean, the bio really captured my life, like what it is that I'm doing. I think more than anything, it's perhaps why I do what I do. My role at ESPN is a development role. Again, I oversee our company's development, inclusion, and wellness, so employee well-being, and that's an extension
Mhm.
of who I am and what I believe in. And so it seems just very seamless to me how my professional and personal life intermix, because outside of my job, I'm also very committed to helping people to grow and learn and develop and be their best selves. So, whether inside the AHA community, whether it's mentoring others from high school to college students to young professionals, just helping them to think about where they want to be in life and all of that. And so even the writing of the blog is the topics that I choose are really about helping people to think about their lives and be much more intentional and to understand what their beliefs and values are, and so they can live authentically and pursue reach their highest potential and pursue their best lives. So I guess I don't see much separation. People talk about work life balance, and I am balanced because I do believe in well-being, but it really is in every area of my life. I feel like a long time ago I kind of decided that these are my values, this is what I love, this is what I feel like is purposeful for me, and that those are the things that guide the decisions of the things that I get involved in. So yeah, it's that bio is pretty much kind of who I am and what I do.
Yeah, it's awesome when your work, your daytime work can transfer over to what your passion, whether it's a side business, a side community that you're putting together. It's amazing when those passions can kind of where there is no threshold. When you have that mentality of well-being and helping people get better at who they are with who they are, seeing themselves, it's amazing that you don't necessarily have to have a threshold where it is work-life balance. It almost seems like it's just an extension of who you want to be, and you're bringing it to those two worlds.
Yeah, it's interesting. I'm reading another book, not the book we're going to talk about a little later, but I'm reading another book by Stephen Joseph called Authentic, and I'm in this place where he's talking about eudaimonia versus hedomonia or something like that, and to pursue to live your best life and to have that sense of joy in your life. It is about being authentic to who you are, finding your authenticity, um, and to living your values. And when you do that, it shows up in every area of your life. You're focused on your personal development, you're focused on helping others. And so as I was reading that, I was saying, this is why I have so much joy in the things that I'm doing, because I have figured out what matters to me, and I've aligned as best I can. I mean, we're always growing, right, and learning more about ourselves. But I'm pretty aligned to that, and that's why I feel like in my professional life and in my personal life, I've made decisions that really reflect my values and the things that I love.
It's amazing that you talk about that just because it's something that comes up so often, whether it's with clients or other groups that I'm a part of, or even in conversations like this, where people talk about how it's when they find their biggest fulfillment, their strongest fulfillment, it's because they've gone inward to the core of who they are. Uh, and it's come up in so many different contexts, whether it's professional, personal. And for me, the last couple of days, it's been about programming for students.
Mm,
And that's based on the fact that most of us that are later in our career, when we get to that final joy where it really feels 100%, where we are close to firing on all cylinders. And I only say close to because, like you said, we're always works in progress.
yes.
But what's amazing is when I worked with people, when they felt like that, it's that they've gone back to being a dreamer, or they've gone back to who they are, because it's almost like as kids, you're taught like this is the path, this is the script that you should follow. It's all about like the hierarchy and getting to that next rung. So it's fascinating when we can finally get to that point, and it's been written about ad nauseum, like authenticity and being genuine and being who you truly are. That's why I'm always looking for examples to demonstrate, yeah, that really exists. It's there and it can power you forward, living through that passion, that purpose, whatever you want to call it. Because so many people get into, oh, don't call it passion, don't call it
Yeah.
purpose. But when you get to that authentic self, it's amazing because it's just kind of like, it's like self perpetuating. It's like you don't even need energy for it. It just kind of once you get started, it kind of keeps self-motivating and pushing forward.
Well, you're absolutely right. I believe that wholeheartedly. And, a lot of times we get to our authentic selves because we have been brave enough and honest enough with ourselves to recognize the inauthenticity and the way in which we are trying to live up to other people's expectations, society's expectations or definitions of what success is. We come to that realization, um, and usually it's because we've encountered some kind of difficulty in life, and I'm no different in that. I think it was earlier in my career where I was on a search for, it's a longer story. I'm going to try to really
Yeah, yeah.
do the brief version of it. But yeah, I was pursuing a different career path. Thought I wanted to go to law school 10 years after I had gotten out of undergraduate. But by this time I was married. Had two small children, and I was working full time as a teacher during the day because that's how I started my career. And so I was teaching during the day, and I was in law school 4 nights a week. And again, I'm married. I got two small
Wow.
kids and a full time career. So I tried to do it all, and because I was trying to check off something, I was trying to check a box that I had identified as I was coming out of my undergraduate education, and I bombed at it. It just wasn't good. My life kind of just, I just was not happy. I was not successful. And I took a pause to say, I've got to get back to what I really love. And when I quit my teaching job, and I just stayed home for a few months and really spent a lot of time in reflection and prayer, and thought to myself, what is it that when I'm doing it, I enjoy it? Not because I had this goal long time ago, or because someone said, hey, you'd be good at this, or good. What is it that is within me? Um, and so I realized that I did love, helping people to learn, grow, develop. I enjoy that a lot. And instead of doing it in the schools and classrooms with younger students, I thought, oh, I'll give my try at the corporate world. And that's when I made the transition over into the corporate space as a training manager. And then my career just kind of kept going from there. And but yeah, I really got honest with myself about what it is that I enjoyed doing, and that, yeah, was just kind of as they say, light you up, and the rest is history here.
Yeah, I think the example came up when you talk about what is it that fires you up? Just you, not that's um driven by or pushed by anybody else, but and I've said this to students, like, when you're moving forward, think about what you can do that's going to make you happy. If you could do something and not share it at all with other people, right? Like
Yeah,
social media, oh, look what I'm doing, look what I'm doing. Nothing wrong with that, but if you could do something without sharing it, and you would be fired up by it, it would make you happy, it would make you feel fulfilled. What is it that that would be? Because so many students go through that where, my mom's at this or my dad's at this, or they want me to go into this. And, you're young,
yeah,
you don't know what's what. I mean, we try to please our parents, but that kind of sensation sticks around while you get older because, like you said, you're going down that path that was kind of put in front of you for whatever reason or however it happened until you get to that point where you just say, "This isn't quite me." To varying degrees, like you fight it or you just say, "I just got to shift away from it." But it's 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 something that comes across a lot in these kind of conversations, whether it's
yeah.
professional with students. But I love talking about that authenticity. So when it comes to you, you spoke about your experiences in college and what happened from there, but when you went to college or when you have this kind of appreciation for teaching others, where did that stem from? Where was it you think that your personality today, the attributes you have that lead you to create the AHA Life, your AHA Life community, where it's about helping people further along in their career or their career period? What is it from your past, whether it was education or family? What is it you think kind of, even though you didn't go down that path initially, where does that stem from?
Well, yeah, definitely. The apple doesn't fall too far from the tree. My parents were educators. My maternal grandparents were educators. So
Oh,
education
wow.
was a big, part of our lives and a part of our value system. And so when I got my undergraduate degree from University of Florida out of journalism, out of broadcast media, I wasn't sure that that's what I really wanted to pursue. And so a girlfriend of mine, who is also Dr. Tanya, we both have the same name, but she said, why don't you come down to Miami and teach for a year? And then you can decide whether you want to go on to graduate school, law school, or go into media. And I didn't have a better plan. So I went down and I lived with her parents for that year. And I taught in inner city Miami. It's a really creative, artsy district now, but it was a poor, very poor area of Miami, and my students were largely children of immigrants,
Mhm.
African American and Cuban descent, and Haitian descent, Dominican Republic. So very, very eclectic, but very poor. And I remember one day I was teaching in the classroom that day, and something broke up the lesson. Either we had a fire drill or whatever. So I got off topic and I just went around that classroom with 11-year-olds and 12-year-olds and asked them, you can relate to this, John, like, what do you want to do? What do you want to be when you grow up? And of course, at that age, they all want the boys, they want to be firemen, they want to be police officers, they want to be professional athletes, all of that. And the girls, they wanted to be dancers, they wanted to own their own beauty salons and things like that. And the last student that I came to, Anaris, still remember her name, can still see her face. I wish that I remembered her last name and wish that I could get in touch with her. But I came to Anaris and I asked her, and she said, she whispered it. She said, "I want to be a doctor." And she said it all as though that was so incredulous. Like, how could she, living in the community that she's in, surrounded by poverty, how could she have a dream that big? It seemed like that's the way. I don't know if that's how she meant it, but that's what came across me. This
Mhm.
wave of compassion came across me as I looked into her eyes, and then I looked into the eyes of all of my students. And I realized that, yes, these students, they had dreams just like anyone else, just like any other 11 or 12-year-old. They had big dreams for their lives. And yet they would find that they also have big hurdles to cross over. And it was there in that classroom that I had my first aha. I had my aha moment there, that um, my first aha related to my career, because I thought I was just taking this teaching job just to make some money for a year and figure out what it is that I really wanted to do. And the aha was that no, I was meant to be there. I was supposed to be there. I was supposed to encounter those students. I was supposed to listen to Anaris and see the dreams inside of her. And it really just really it changed the trajectory of my career. I knew from that day on that whatever I ended up doing, it would be to help people to believe in their dreams, to believe in themselves, and to help remove roadblocks and barriers to help them achieve those things. So it's back in that classroom that started even the work that I do in your AHA Life, the AHA community, and even at ESPN.
That's amazing that, but not surprising that you can trace it back to a moment where, yeah, you just see somebody, especially that young, relatively vulnerable at that young, not knowing that they could do whatever they put their mind to. That sounds cliche, but they need to hear those kind of
Right.
messages. But it's amazing that you can tie it back to that one particular moment to help somebody move forward. Uh, and even if it was that moment so long ago, and your path took all these different curves and turns through, thinking you wanted to go to law school and whatnot, it all served its purpose because here you are doing the work during the day and at night of just helping people improve.
Yeah. Recently in our AHA community, there was this question as a part of our gratitude journey. And it was like, what didn't pan out in your life that now you're so grateful that it didn't? Because, and it was the law school. For me, it was the law school thing. I'm so glad that I didn't have great success there, because
Yeah.
I might have had a different path, but not that experience not going well for me and taking time away from teaching. It took me right back to that classroom, that dusty classroom in the inner city of Miami, and looking into the eyes of my students, that made me realize that what I got the greatest sense of joy doing. And so sometimes, yeah, things don't work out, because your path is meant to go another way, and I'm so grateful for it.
Yeah, and I was invited recently by a friend of mine at the University of Hartford to have that kind of conversation with students, mostly first year students. But she says, we've had conversations with professionals we bring back, and we're showing the careers that they're in and how they got there, and everything works out and everything's great. But they also need to see the other side of it. S
Right.
Not to say, "You're a mess, John, we're gonna call you in." But she's saying, "We see what you're doing, we see that you're happy, but we wanna have real talk with them that it takes different avenues, it takes different turns and curves to get there, the highs, the lows, the ups and downs, that it's not a straight path, that very rarely when you leave college do you go into your dream career, that there's letdowns, there's what you would call failure, the things that didn't work out.
Yeah.
And what's great about your story is you got to that point where you're like, law school's not for me. Certain people would be like, okay, then I don't know what else to do. Or if this path doesn't work out, that's it. Like, and they don't have the motivation, they don't have the inspiration, maybe the resilience to keep going, keep pushing, and being curious about different avenues that they can take. And that, again, it goes back to students because I'm like, if students were shown this, if they were explained this, if they were told stories that, things not working out, it's not a failure. It's not like when you fail class and you're going to stay back. Cause I think that just, I think it harms the way they think because they don't want to take steps outside of their comfort zone. They don't
Yeah.
want to experiment. So I think those are the kind of stories that they need to hear.
Yeah, we all have setbacks and we all encounter pain and disappointments. And I think that's a part of our beautiful story.
Yeah.
I mean, how bland would it be if everything just turned out, you know? So I think it has been those rough spots in life that helped me to get to know myself better, to, as you said, learn the resilience that is the human spirit, and also to more accurately and authentically define what matters to me. So again, I think if things are just going your way, success is great, but success can, without any sense of failure, without any sense of disappointment, I don't know that we actually become our best selves in that way.
Yeah. Somebody had said to me, she's like, "Can you imagine if we got everything we wanted when we
Oh,
wanted it?" Imagine how bored we'd be. We're built for obstacles. I mean, it's encoded in our DNA. We're built to fight, and we have all this energy inside of us. And if we're not using it, it's gonna go to waste. And sometimes I don't think people know how to channel it. And mine was, a learning process where, I mean, honestly, I could say only in the last 2 or 3 years do I really understand the the benefit of obstacles because it
mm.
shows you what you want, what you don't want, what you're passionate about, what you're not, what works out, experimenting. So yeah, another cliche, but it all serves some kind of purpose.
Well, it's so fitting because the book that I'm going to share with you shortly is by Ryan Holiday,
Hmm.
and I got to know him through his. I don't know if it was his first book. It was the first book of his that I read, and it was called "The Obstacle Is the Way."
Got it right
And
here.
yeah, yeah, it was. I fell in love. He had me at hello. Let's just say that. I now, when he writes something, I am really leaning forward to read it. And yeah, you learn that yes, the obstacle is the way. The impediment to action becomes the action. And so I agree. Obstacles are not meant to stop us. They're meant to perhaps help us to grow in ways that otherwise we would not.
Yeah, I mean, it's all about translating it, and I think
Yeah.
we don't teach those tools to students. We don't say cave, but we don't give them the tools to say, okay, this is what came against you. This is what pushed you back. Now let's go back. We'll study your tactics, your strategy, whatever you want to call it. And we'll go back and either figure out if that's what we want to keep doing and try again a different way or try something else completely. But it's in that first pushback that most people shut down.
Yeah.
So which book of his is it that you want to cover today?
Yeah. So I'm sharing today Courage is Calling. It's one of his latest books, if not the latest, and it was published in late 2021, so late last
Okay.
year.
Okay.
He wrote on this topic of courage. It's actually, he is beginning a series. This is the first book in a 4-part series that he will be writing on. And it's around these ancient cardinal virtues. And the first virtue that he talks about is courage, because he says courage serves as the foundation for the others, which are, I hope I get this right, temperance, justice. Oh, I'm gonna forget the other one. So there was courage, temperance, justice. I'm gonna forget the
It'll come
fourth one.
back to you in like
Yes.
5 minutes. You'll blurt
Yeah,
it
yeah,
out.
and then I'll blurt it out.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's all right. Don't worry about it.
Oh, I see it. I see it. I wrote it.
Okay.
Wisdom. Wisdom. Yeah.
Okay. So, yeah, you're a fan of his writing. So, what is it that stood out about this book? I mean, obviously, I've read his book. I've read The Obstacle is the Way. There's the other one that has like meditations for each day of the year, where
Yes,
it goes
yeah.
through a passage from one of the Stoic philosophers. Most times it's Marcus Aurelius, and then
Yes.
he kind of breaks down how we can apply it to the modern day, society we live in. So aside from knowing his history and looking at the cover and just saying, okay, courage is calling, great. What was it in the book that might have stood out for you? Because he has like such a language that he uses. Um, the way he writes, it's almost like he's sitting down with you, like in your ear, just
Yeah.
saying, look at it this way, consider this, consider
Yes.
that. So what
Yes.
was it? What might have he included in the book in such a way that it stood out for you?
Well, so yes, I love his writing. I'm drawn to his writing, because I always feel like, in addition to you know reading that book and the topic that it's about, is I get a history lesson. He does talk about the Stoics and ancient philosophers, but he also talks about, world history. He likes to use a lot of historical figures, and even in Courage is Calling, he talks about historical leaders as well as contemporary leaders, and how they have all exhibited some type of courage. And he says that courage is calling, it calls to all of us. And kind of the admonishment is answer, answer the call. And that the things that get in our way mainly are fear,
Yeah.
fear based. And that fear keeps us from our destinies, keeps us from speaking out about causes and issues that we feel in our heart are should be spoken out. But he said, is if no one else is doing that, then it's yours to do. So it really was motivational, inspiring in a way, educational in a lot of ways, as he's telling these different stories. But I think there was something he was quoting Faulkner, so I wrote it down. I'm going to share it with you. It says we all face fear, right? So we all face it, but it is not that we face it, is it's about rising above it. And so this quote, he says, he cites it in here. It's by William Faulkner. He says, "Be scared. You can't help that, but don't be afraid." And so that's the quote by William Faulkner. But he goes on to say that a scare is a temporary condition, a temporary feeling. Being afraid, fear is a state of being, and that is what you don't want. So I think I'm just, I was drawn to the title, Courage. I was drawn to him, to the book because of his writing, but the topic itself is something that, even as I'm reading about authenticity, it's about being courageous, having courage to be yourself, and having courage. And I think about, you know, I wrote a blog on this some time ago about, I used to think that I was not courageous. And, but I had a very courageous mother who passed away when I was in college. And I wanted so much to be courageous. And so that word, being courageous, is something that has always stood out for me. And so I was drawn to the title in that way. And then just hearing the stories about Martin Luther King Jr., about Frederick Douglass, about Florence Nightingale, about I mean, I learned things I didn't even know about Charles de Gaulle, who ended up being the president of France.
Mhm.
Um, just his, how he, as a really led kind of the fight against the infiltration of Nazi Germany into France. And so it took courage. And I just think about in everything that we do, anything big that we're going to do in life, it's going to take courage, and so yeah, that's kind of what stood out to me a lot. And I'm a quotes person, so I have tons of quotes from the book. But yeah, it's a book that has had an impact on me, and I feel like I'm still absorbing so much of what I read in the book, little by little, and I enjoy it.
So aside from what we would assume, he speaks about courage and stepping up and stepping out. And have you seen have you seen little tweaks in yourself, little things that you've changed in the way that you approach your life or your business or your work, just based on reading it? I mean, it's amazing when we read something that's great, that's put a different way. Because there are books on leadership, there are books on courage, there are books on bravery. And it's funny, somebody always says to me, "Is like, why do you have so many leadership books?" I'm like, all right, I like the discipline, but at the same time, you can take one topic and different people will write about it in different ways.
True.
Like we just said about Holiday, just the way that he writes is very straightforward. It kind of holds you accountable. I think it calls you on your
Yeah.
bullshit. Like it's very
Yes.
I read a lot in his writing, like, seriously, like a lot of what you say is holding you back is caused by yourself.
Right.
And there's that stoic philosophy, like you have what happens to you, but how are you? There's nothing you can change about it. There's
Yeah.
nothing complaining, moaning, none of that is going to help anything. You just have to react to, um, be as prepared as possible. But
Yeah.
whatever happens, you can't control it. So
Right.
when you're going to use your emotion, think about it. Is it something you can control or something you can't? Like every time I read his
Yeah.
writing, that's the way I hear
Yeah.
him, like in my ear, just saying, you got to be accountable to yourself. You got to open up your eyes and see what's really there.
Yeah.
So, are there instances or examples that you can give? If not, that's all right. But
Yeah, I
when
mean,
you've
and
read something great, has it kind of tweaked the way you've really used it in your life when you've thought about courage and stepping up?
yeah, I think so. I'm just soaking in what you're saying, John. Uh, I'm a slow reader. I used to, try to read fast, because I want to read so many books per year. I wanted to all this stuff, but then I realized that that's not really. I read to learn. I read to apply. I read to reflect and be introspective. So I'm a slow reader in that way. And I've learned to accept that about myself.
No, but
And
I think that helps because that's what made you an effective facilitator for the book club was that you brought out your quotes that you found in the readings and you brought out examples and you asked us questions about what you had read, your interpretation versus what we thought. So that's a great quality.
yeah, I love those discussions, by the way, just like this. I mean, I could do this like all day. But how has it shown up for me? I, you know, I think that some tangible ways is that I'm really okay having a point of view that's different from the majorative point of view in the room. And that's not just about being a contrarian, because sometimes it's not being I don't really care to be a contrarian, honestly.
Mhm.
I It's about that we all maybe I'm breaking the ice, just by having the courage to offer a different perspective around something. and then it opens up other perspectives. And I don't know that I necessarily do it for that reason, but if something is really if I think that we are missing a point, or that my perspective might be a value add, then I'm going to offer it. And it's little things like that. It doesn't have to be, we have to go, save France from Nazi Germany, or Martin Luther King to launch an entire country's civil rights movement. Those things are phenomenal and took a great deal of courage. And the other thing I'm get off a little bit, but he talks about when we do acts of courage, we're seldom alone. So again, that's another thing that I just think about. We're seldom alone, but we might have to be to start.
Yeah.
We might have to be to start. And so I think being able to, offer a different point of view in a room. I think learning to say no when I mean no, instead of just doing something to that's expected, or to get along, or I don't want to hurt someone else's feelings. Even that is an act of courage. Um, I think that I'm still processing all of those, but I think that we have so many opportunities, particularly in today's society, to speak with courage, to act with courage and conviction around the things that we believe in. And yeah, and I think that honestly, I think that contributes to well-being. I believe that when we don't act with courage, when we act from a place of fear, when we keep quiet, when we know our voice is needed in the room, I think it probably just adds stress to us, mental stress, physical stress. And so I do think it could be that exemplifying more courage, while it's not always an easy road, seldom is an easy road, honestly, in the long run, it contributes to our well being.
You just said a lot.
I
There's a
know.
lot to unpack there. I agree with you completely. And what I took away from what you said, my understanding is that it's amazing, like you said, courageous, right? Being courageous, having courage. You don't need to invade, insert country.
Yeah.
You don't need to go fight on the front lines of this war over here. You don't need to necessarily start a movement. It's one of those things where people think if you ask me to do something, it means I have to do something beyond, like I have to rise up to the highest level. And there's kind of like no in between. They think like courage is fighting something off or putting your the most that you've got into something. But then there are those everyday things that you've mentioned,
Yeah.
which are powerful because they create ripple effects. And what kills me most about that is we're talking about courage and kind of putting out there what we're about, our authentic self, right? Being authentic, flying in the face of what may be groupthink or something to that effect. But it's amazing how much courage we need just to be who we are.
Yeah. You hit the nail on the head. Is that yeah, that's it. Absolutely. It does take sometimes courage just to be ourselves, to be who we already are at our core. Because there's so many messages around that want to shape us into a certain way, and
Mhm.
it's easier sometimes just to do that instead of, but you won't be happy, and that's what I mean about the well-being. I think sometimes it takes courage to set boundaries. That's what I mean by saying no to things. Sometimes, setting boundaries. It takes courage to love yourself first, because we've taught ourselves, oh, that's selfish, on a day of on
It's
all of
a
this stuff.
of all
But
days.
yeah, so I think that there are little ways in which we can show courage, and like you said, courage is always calling, and it's just waiting for us to answer.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I can't speak to everything that anyone is going through in terms of like mental health, but I know
Oh,
mine has gotten better since I've and a lot of my friends can say, "No, you've always been outspoken." But it's like what you're outspoken spoken about. Like you said, it's not about being to be a contrarian.
Right.
I was never acting, but I was never being as much as I felt that I was inside. And
Mm,
when you get to that point where you can be authentic, it's not being shocking or anything like that, but it's just that's what really speaking your truth means. A lot of people may look at speaking your truth as helping to amplify what's on the outside, what the message is of the group. But speaking your truth is really what you absolutely need. So there's a lot that I've thought about so much in terms of your authentic self really speaking from who you are and how that's tied to mental health. Because as soon as
mm,
I found myself speaking that, getting that energy out of myself, things that felt cooped up, then I felt more relaxed. Then I felt more comfortable in my skin. Um,
yes.
because there can be a lot of toxic positivity out there. You know, put as much as you can into the message that is out there. It's the noble thing to do. You got to be a team player. You got to go along. You can't disagree. So when you finally break
Everything
a
is good, everything,
everything
everything
is
is
good,
good.
you know, as long as everybody's working towards happiness, like just go along with whatever. Um, and that's something that I've looked at more and more, and you hear more and more about it is that toxic positivity. Like people are trying
You
to do
know,
the
when
noble
you
thing, so they'll kind of sacrifice their own happiness to work towards that group think, I guess, goal of kumbaya, whatever it may be. And I'm not
you're
mocking it
hitting
at
on
all.
such a you're hitting on such a great point because we have heard about toxic positivity, and initially I was like, "Oh, what is that?" "How can positivity be toxic?"
Yeah,
And then but now I know, yes, it is denying that there is pain. Denying pain, denying disappointment, denying frustrations, denying and when you're denying, all you're doing is subverting this, is just pressing it, suppressing it. But
yeah,
when it suppresses, it's going to have to come out some way, and
absolutely.
so in fact, when you were describing the AHA community and you talked about it being a positive community, I almost interjected right then and say, but it's not toxic positivity, it's
Yeah,
real. It's real.
absolutely, absolutely.
People are sharing difficulties
Yeah.
as well as triumphs, and
Let me clarify that right now.
yeah,
When I mean positive, I mean working in the best fashion for yourself. And part of that for me is dealing with everything. So I mean,
right.
you had the I forget how many days it was of gratitude where you asked
40
us
days.
40
Yeah.
days of gratitude where you asked some of us to post, you know, for that day, would you share something you're grateful for? And I mean, you'll note that the ones that I posted were what some people may not consider positive. So
Mm,
some people were saying, I'm thankful that I got this, or I'm thankful that I received this, or I'm thankful that this made whatever my life easier. And mine was like, one of mine was like, I'm thankful for the silver linings that came from the pandemic,
yeah. I
from
remember
obstacles,
that.
from,
Yes.
you know, pain. Like it opened up my eyes to a lot of the work that I needed to do for myself. Again, like you said, sometimes being selfish, like that's what you need to do. But yeah, I wouldn't say it's not like a kumbaya community. It's very supportive, but it allows everybody to bring themselves in. So it's not that toxic positivity where everything has to be right, everything has to be beautiful. If it is, it happens to be, but it's not
Right.
only
Right.
solely about there's no bad in the world. It's about supporting each other in the tools that allow us to move through life with whatever we're dealing with. So
Wow.
I definitely want to clarify
Yeah,
that.
that's great. Yes, absolutely.
So, Tanya, when it comes to this book, what is like the overall messaging? Is it, I don't know if you have the book, but is it a story per chapter that kind of works in a certain arc, or does he have his arc that he's breaking down this argument in and then providing examples? Like, what could somebody find in the book?
Well, the book is organized by 3 parts. So, part 1, he deals with fear, and again, we all have fear. And he talks about these stories of people triumphing over fear. And so there, the stories that the way the book is structured is, part 1 is fear. and the stories are no more than 2 or 3 pages each. So there are a lot of, there's a lot of stories in which he's addressing that topic. And then this part two is on courage. And it is again, just amplifying courage, and then part three is on heroic, heroic acts of deed and things like
Mhm.
that. But so I just love the short stories because he doesn't take a long time to develop the story. Like I said, he developed the story of Frederick Douglass or Martin Luther King or Florence Nightingale or de Gaulle in France. There's so many stories and you're like, wow, that was good. And so some of the topics, we defeat fear with logic. What if? It's just so many. I don't know. By the time you go through the entire book, you probably have gone through at least 50 stories. So there's quite a bit there, but they're all so great, and they all just again, a great storyteller to bring out this topic of courage in so many different ways and give you so many different looks at it so that you will find yourself in any one of those situations. You will find yourself, maybe not all of them, but there are plenty there that you will
Yeah.
say, that relates to me. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, especially with fear, because I mean, we live in this highlight reel society where, like, on social media, we happen to just show like the best moments, right? Well, we were just talking
Yeah.
about what students need to see, that it's not all highs, it's not all positive. But I mean, I remember even reading about Martin Luther King, and just you see this picture of him, or you see the video of him, and you just always imagine him with that kind of strength, that kind of vibrato. But he was like very sick with just like the pressure of being that face. I mean, there was he the hardship that he failed in just kind of being the face of that movement. I forget which book it was that I read it in, but it really opened up my eyes to and you know that what you see is not always what's behind there, but
Right.
really what went into him getting to that place where we finally saw him on screen
Yeah.
speaking and all that. So
I read
um
something, I forget, what book it was, but I read where he, initially was reluctant to take on that leadership role and wasn't sure that it was aligned with his Christian values.
yes.
And he had an aha,
Uh, I
s
forget which book it
I
was, but
forget too.
it was very much that, and it followed him along. Damn
Right,
it. It followed him along from, like, very early, but it took him, I think, I don't wanna misspeak, but I think it took him, like, a couple years to get there, to be like, "Okay, this is what we have to do."
right.
That it wasn't that they were like, "Martin, you need to do this." He was like, "Okay, it'll be me." Like, he
Yeah.
had so many stakeholders as well, the people that were more forceful versus the ones that had more patience, and he kinda had to do all of that. But yeah, it just
You
shows
know
you.
what, John? There's so many stories of bravery, um and I think you said it best, honestly, of the most courageous is being ourselves, you know? There's so many stories in this little book. I'll, just give a plug. I don't know if you can see it or
Yep.
whatever, but it's a small book. It's a very easy read. You will be engaged in it for sure. But I think what he does is because of all these different ways in which he tells the story, and you can see yourself in some of these stories, you realize that, yeah, we all, we all um, have it in us
Mhm.
to be courageous. And so I do love the book, and I love the stories that it tells. And yeah, you think about these people, whether it's my ancestors or just even what we're going through in today's society. it's I think about like the what's her name? Is it Greta Thunberg? The 16-year-old
Yeah.
old.
Yep.
I mean, that's a courageous young woman, to speak up for climate change and all of that, and receive hate and everything, and it doesn't deter her. She's probably a modern day Florence Nightingale. And then Malala, who um you know became, won the Nobel Peace Prize, and really because she believed in the right of young girls, and to receive education, so much so that she was shot by the Taliban, and all of that. So again, now that would probably fall in the heroic part of the
Yeah.
book,
Yeah.
but yeah, it's just
I mean,
speaking
even
up.
if that falls in like the heroic category, obviously we can't say that there are no levels to it, right? There's everyday speech within your
Right.
friends, and then there's something
Yes.
like she did, of course. But hopefully that pushes us to think, okay, if she did that, I can voice my opinion in this smaller group. It all
Right.
depends on the person,
Oh.
obviously, but I guess when we learn that we don't have the physical violence on the line the way she knew that something like that would happen. I mean,
Hmm.
it's a history of it with the Taliban and similar groups. Hopefully that pushes us to say, listen, the worst that could happen is what? What happens to me?
Yeah.
I mean, within reason, due diligence,
Yeah,
don't
within
set your
reason.
workplace on fire or anything like that. But, seriously, what's the worst that'll happen to me? Maybe embarrassment. Maybe I'm told that my idea is crap. Am I in the right setting? Am I in the right group? Can I go
Yeah.
to a different tribe that's not my tribe that's going to say, yes, 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 you're right, you're right, you're right. But they'll say, okay, maybe not, but think about it this way and see if you can improve it. So I don't know. It's just everyday courage. We have to put everything in perspective. And I think
Everyday courage.
everything is just so fight or flight
Yeah.
where our
And
heart
and
races
that's the
and
primitive, right? That's our primitive self. Like, come
we're
on.
not going to be attacked by some kind of wild animal. Like, in most cases, the worst that can happen is embarrassment. But our
Right.
our our hearts, our bodies are just programmed to think that like our life will end if we voice our opinions. But and obviously that depends on the person, the circumstances. But hopefully that opens people's eyes up to whether or not they are and want to share their best of who they are. I always say, listen, what I coach isn't law. It's not what you should be doing, but I want you to consider it
Right.
because most often if somebody considers something they're just learning a different way to look at it.
Yeah.
So just one more question before we start
Okay.
wrapping up. Tanya, was there a particular story besides the ones that you mentioned? I don't know if Greta's was in the book at all, but are there any other stories that stand out to you?
Well, I certainly I've talked about de Gaulle of France, Frederick Douglass, who was being beaten. He's a slave. He was a slave, and was being beaten by his overseer, and he had had enough. He had had enough, and he beat him back. And this is the violent part, which I don't know why I chose this. I have another one that I'm going to end with really quickly, though, John. But
Yeah.
um, and he had just had enough of he had seen this other slave called Nellie earlier in his life. I don't know if you've read. I have this biography that I'm going to read of his. It is on my reading list to read this year because he is an incredible historical figure. But
Yeah, a friend of
yeah.
mine told me about that book,
Yeah.
that he was just fascinated by, this is a man who was a slave and certain people had a lot of people shared the mentality, but he quoted somebody just saying, they shouldn't be reading, they shouldn't be reading because if they learn, then they'll know, that there's
Mm.
more out there beyond what they have now. So it's been on my list because it sounds like an amazing story.
Yeah, maybe we'll read that one together. It's a thick book, though. It'll take
Absolutely.
us a while. Um,
Absolutely.
but yeah, so he beat his overseer, and his motto became, "You." Well, and at that day, when a slave beat their white overseer, their master, they were killed. And so it was tremendous courage for him to say, "You're not going to beat me like this anymore." And his mantra became, "You can kill me, but you can't whip me anymore." And he was not whipped anymore. The story says he was not whipped anymore beyond that day. And he then later on, of course, went on to help fight for the end of slavery. So, it was talking about our capacity. We underestimate our capacity for courage. And that was such a great story in that. But the story I want to also share is one that I wrote in my blog, and it's the way that it opens up. I believe it's either in chapter 1 or maybe in the introduction, and he talks about Hercules. So, he says Hercules finds himself at a crossroads, and at one of the roads where they diverged, one of the roads there stood this beautiful goddess who promised, all of these great riches, anything, everything he desired, it would be met. And then on the other road, it says, stood a stern goddess who promised him nothing except what he would earn through his own hard work. And went on to say it would be a long and scary road. That journey, it would be complete with sacrifice, but it would be a journey that was fit for a God. It would make him the person that his ancestors meant for him to be. And of course, he chooses the path of the stern goddess. He chose courage. And so that's how that story is. And so he talks about we all stand at crossroads. We all stand at crossroads. So choosing courage, because courage is calling, we have to answer.
Yeah, and I think that visual of him standing at a crossroads kind of summarizes the different examples that we've given. Um, yeah, and for me, it's so tricky because it's I don't know how it came to you. I'm assuming you also had this kind of idea before you read the book, but again, he writes in such a way that you see it, it sinks in, you understand it a little more. But it's just amazing how long it takes for us to understand the value in that. And we
Yeah.
all see it at different times, whether it's a level of maturity, education, experience. Uh, it's just amazing how long in life it takes to realize that. But then again, then you've already been on that path where it is obstacles. Yes, you didn't necessarily choose them, but they made you who you are in that moment when you begin saying, okay, now I know that that's life, that's what life is, and it's just about how you accept it, how you react. So thank you for sharing that story. That was amazing.
Yeah. You're welcome. You're welcome. I
So
feel like I'm just really, um, kind of almost observing my life and almost have my antenna up in terms of where I can, you know, definitely be my authentic self and to act with courage. Yeah. And just really paying homage to my mother, who, again, my parents, I love them both. But they divorced when I was about 5, and so I was raised primarily. I lived with my mom, and so seeing this single woman, raise her kids, and a teacher and community activist and all of that, and then losing her when I was just 20 and she was just 43.
Wow.
I think courage has been this word that I use to, I just think she was one of the most courageous women I ever knew. And so learning more about how to show up as my authentic and courageous self is really me, honoring everything that I learned from her and everything that I saw in her.
Absolutely. Yeah,
Yeah.
I think I've shared with you when my dad passed away, same kind of thing. You
Mm,
realize you always knew what you had, but when they're not there, you really
you really
understand.
know.
You
Yeah.
really understand. I don't know about you, but for me, I always thought, yeah, I'm following my dad's footsteps. I tried to be like him when I was a kid, and it sunk in. And but then when he passed away, I realized just how much I am like him, and all the everything that he showed me what hardship was in terms of, um, they worked in a blue collar environment, my parents. So he had to work several jobs sometimes to make ends meet, laid out a path for me. And so I see the value in that hard work. So I can appreciate you just kind of paying homage to your mom. So I love that as well.
Yeah, yeah. Well, you're an incredible guy, and I'm so glad that we met and that we are our journeys, our roads have intersected, and we're traveling this journey together and learning from one another. I really appreciate it, and I appreciate everything that you do too, John.
Absolutely. I The same goes for you. Yeah, when you get to that point where you're kind of authentic and you know what to look for, what you want to look for, you surround yourself with like-minded people, not the same ideas, but just that kind of
Yeah,
thirst for growing together. So I appreciate that.
yeah,
Tanya, is there anything else you want to or one last question. So how would you summarize this book for somebody? Because I try to get the message across about the book, regardless of what field they're in, anything from CEO over to garbage man. Like, what is the standard lesson that somebody could take from this? How would you word that to kind of convince them to look into this book?
I mean, I think I've said it over and over is that we all first of all, we all experience fear, but you can be scared, but not afraid, right? And that because fear will hold us back, fear will keep us from our destinies, and no one wants to live that way. We all want to be our best, live our best lives, because this is not a rehearsal, this is it. And so we want to live our best lives. And so rising above fear means that we choose courage. And so looking for those opportunities to choose courage. I think that's what this book is all about. And it's in everyday experiences, not waiting for this big monumental thing, but in your everyday experiences, there's opportunity to choose courage.
Absolutely. I love that he distinguishes between being scared, in that moment versus fear, which is it can catch up with you if you give into that the temporary feeling, it can be everlasting. So I love that he
Right.
breaks that down. Tanya, is there anything else you want to share or mention about the group or anything at all? Any of
Yeah,
any of your work
yeah,
that
sure.
people should pay attention, and hopefully you come back and talk about your own book that you're working on.
Yeah, I am working on a book. Right now, draft Your Aha Life. Go figure. But I am. Uh, as I said, I'm the founder of Your Aha Life. It is a global movement, so I'd love for you to check it out. Just go to yourahalife.com, and there you'll have the access to my monthly newsletter. I do monthly aha moments, which are short little video bites on some truth, if you will, to help you live your best life. And I have a blog that I published twice a month, usually at the beginning of the month and at the end of the month. And then of course the AHA community, which is again my private Facebook community. And come check us out. Come join.
Yeah, so much to take away from that. I mean, just learning about Tanya in this conversation, you get a sense for what she prioritizes and the way she approaches her work, her life. So, Tanya, thank you so much for taking the time to have this conversation with me.
Thank you, John. Thanks for having me.
And if there's anything that I might have missed or not asked because we're limited on time or I didn't think of the question, I'm sure there are lots of them. Please let me know. Reach out to me, whether it's on social media, email, whatever it may be. Let me know if they are out there, and you let me know. I can reach out to Tanya and see if I can get a response from her and what she may share on whatever questions that I missed. But in the meantime, thank you to everyone for watching and listening, and I'll talk to you soon. Take care.